She slipped a napkin to the Mafia boss. It read next table. He kidnapped me. Don't react. The rain hammering the windows of the Harborfront Steakhouse was relentless, turning the lights of the Seattle skyline into blurred watercolors. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged beef and old money, a warm cocoon against the October chill. Maya Rowan felt none of it. The starched, borrowed apron she wore felt like armor, and the terror beneath it was a block of ice in her stomach. She was temporary help, a ghost gliding between tables, and that anonymity was her only weapon. Her hand, slick with sweat inside her apron pocket, clutched the folded linen napkin. At table 3, near the window, sat Cassian Vale. Even in the low light, he was unmistakable. The head of the Northlight Syndicate didn't just occupy a chair, he held court, his presence drawing all the light in the room toward him. He was in quiet discussion with his lawyer, 2 glasses of dark red wine sitting untouched. Everyone in Seattle knew his name. Maya was counting on the stories being true that he was a man of rules, of a certain dark honor. Her real focus, her prisoner, was at table 4, Tate Riker. He was handsome in the way of a vacant storefront, all clean lines and no substance. He was posing as her boyfriend, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back whenever she was forced to stand near him. Tate, the man who had answered her resume with the promise of a logistics job. Tate, the human data broker who was now, in cold, technical terms, preparing to sell her to an unknown contractor. This was her only chance. She approached table 3, her movements fluid, practiced from a life she thought she'd left behind. More water, Mr. Vale. As she leaned in with the carafe, her left hand emerged from her pocket. In one seamless motion, she placed the folded napkin on the table, just to the left of his bread plate, disguised as a fresh piece of linen. She didn't look at his face. She didn't pause. Her eyes were already on the next table, her service smile cemented in place. The note was written in blue ballpoint, the words pressed hard into the linen. Next table, he kidnapped me. Don't react. Cassian Vale registered the slight weight difference. The napkin landed with a duller sound, heavier, dampened by the fear of the woman who had delivered it. His lawyer, Martin, was droning on about zoning permits for a new warehouse. Cassian's eyes remained fixed on Martin, nodding slightly, as his hand moved casually beneath the table. He unfolded the napkin with his fingertips, his thumb tracing the desperate indents of the letters. He read it once. His expression did not change, not a flicker in his steel-gray eyes, not a tightening of the jaw. The only sign was the sudden stillness of his breathing. He had seen fear before. This was different. This was calculated. The woman hadn't screamed or wept. She had chosen her moment. She had chosen him. His right hand, hidden by the heavy tablecloth, found the small, milled aluminum button secured beneath the mahogany. He pressed it once, a silent digital signal to his driver and head of security, Jules, waiting in the black sedan parked down the block. With a motion of casual grace, Cassian picked up his wine glass. He held it to the light, frowning as if checking for a smudge. He set it down again, but now it was 3 inches to the left, closer to table 4. The heavy crystal base was weighted, perfectly balanced, and contained a high-fidelity microphone. It was now aimed directly at Tate Riker. Maya returned to the kitchen pass, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She needed to keep moving, to appear normal. "Hey," a younger waitress whispered, nudging her as she passed. "Your boyfriend is gorgeous. You two are such a cute couple." Maya forced a smile that felt like broken glass. "He's great." The compliment made her want to vomit. She grabbed a heavy tray of dirty dishes, the weight a welcome anchor to reality. She risked a glance. Cassian Vale was back in conversation with his lawyer. He hadn't looked at her. He hadn't acknowledged the note. A cold dread began to seep into her. What if he thought it was a joke? A setup? What if he was just another criminal who didn't care? She was balancing on a razor's edge, clinging to the fragile hope that a man who lived in shadows would recognize someone else being dragged into them. Tate Riker pulled out his phone. He wasn't texting. He swiped to an encrypted communications app, its icon a plain black square. He lifted it to his ear. "The asset is secure," he murmured, his voice stripped of all its earlier charm. Confirming the exchange point, codename Switchyard. Maya, clearing plates from an adjacent table, strained to listen, her blood turning to ice. Tate paused, listening to the reply. "Understood, the Dakota line. I'll be dark until arrival." Switchyard? Dakota line? The words meant nothing and everything. They sounded industrial, cold and final. He wasn't just taking her somewhere. He was shipping her, like cargo. At table 3, Cassian Vale stood abruptly. The movement was so sudden it cut his lawyer off mid-sentence. Cassian threw a black, unmarked credit card on the table. "We're leaving," he stated. It was not a request. He walked straight past table 4. He walked straight past Maya, who stood frozen by the service station. His gaze swept over her as if she were part of the furniture. He didn't look back. He was gone. Maya's stomach dropped into a void. He had ignored her. The most powerful, dangerous man in the city had read her plea and chosen to do nothing. The hope that had kept her sane for the last 12 hours shattered. She was alone. Tate signaled for the check, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "Time to go, sweetheart." The endearment was a threat. He didn't wait for the server. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, a bruising grip of ownership. He steered her not toward the front door, but through the swinging metal doors of the kitchen, toward the rear service exit. The alley hit them like a physical blow, the cold spray of rain, the stench of the harbor and discarded food. Tate pulled her hard, his pace fast. "My car's just here. Be quiet." A figure blocked the alley's exit to the street, tall in a tailored black coat that seemed to drink the meager light. Sunglasses, stark and alien at night, concealed his eyes. It was Cassian Vale. Tate stopped, yanking Maya half behind him, his hand instantly going to the inside of his jacket. "We don't want trouble," Tate said, his voice suddenly higher. Cassian didn't look at Tate. He didn't even look at Maya. He seemed focused on something down the street, as if waiting for his car. He slowly raised his left hand, adjusting the cuff of his white shirt. As his hand emerged from the coat sleeve, his wrist turned slightly under the dim alley light. His index finger tapped a sequence against the bone of his own wrist. 2 sharp taps, a pause, 1 tap, and a pause. 3 taps. 2, 1, 3. It wasn't a nervous tick. It was a language, a signal she wasn't meant to understand, but one he knew she desperately needed to see. It was the confirmation she thought she had lost. It meant received. Cassian stepped aside, melting back into the deeper shadows. Tate, unnerved but seeing a clear path, shoved Maya forward. "Move! Now!" He hustled her toward a dark sedan idling at the curb. As Tate threw her into the passenger seat, Maya looked back. Cassian's car, a sleek black sedan, pulled away from the curb, its headlights cutting through the descending fog. His driver, Jules, made a calm, legal U-turn. The sedan fell in line. 3 cars back from Tate, a patient shark in the water. The night chase had begun. Seattle, draped in mist and neon, became a labyrinth. It was a silent, lethal pursuit between 2 different kinds of predator, the high-tech, faceless monster of human trafficking and the old world, iron-willed code of the Northlight Syndicate. Pier 47 was a ghost, a forgotten skeleton of corrugated steel and salt-rotted wood on Seattle's industrial waterline. It was the perfect blind spot. Inside, however, the warehouse hummed with the silent, cold power of a server farm. Cassian Vale stepped into the command center, a dark room dominated by a single piece of furniture, a flat, black table. As he approached, the surface flickered to life, projecting a 3-dimensional holographic map of the city. He called it the Convergence Table. "Jules is holding visual. 3 cars back, uploading telemetry," Cassian said, his voice clipped, shedding the restaurant's calm. On the table, A glowing red line snaked away from the harbor front. A license plate number, Washington plate BXR 491, flashed in the corner. "Rhea, talk to me." A woman with dark hair pulled into a severe knot. Rhea Moroz, his head of security, didn't look up from her own bank of monitors. "The plate is a ghost, registered to a 65-year-old woman in Tacoma who died 18 months ago. Tate Riker doesn't exist, not under that name." Another window bloomed on the table, thermal imaging from the steakhouse. Captured by the microphone-equipped wine glass, it showed Tate's heat signature, elevated with adrenaline, contrasted with Maya's, which was spiking and plunging with terror. "He's a broker," Rhea continued, her fingers flying across a keyboard, cross-referencing his facial metrics with dark web forums. "He's a mid-level supplier for a marketplace called the Glass Orchard. They don't sell drugs or guns, they sell data. Living data, people." In the back of Tate's sedan, Maya's world had shrunk to the smell of cheap air freshener and the clicking of the windshield wipers. Her hands were bound in front of her, the plastic zip tie biting into her wrists, hidden under the loose jacket he'd thrown over her. She watched Tate in the rearview mirror, her focus absolute. His eyes were everywhere, flicking from the mirror to the side mirrors, then back to the road. He changed lanes abruptly, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic to take an off-ramp, only to merge back onto the main highway a mile later. He did this 3 times. He was flushing a tail. "He's testing us." Jules's voice crackled over Cashin's earpiece. "Hold your distance," Cashin ordered. Tate suddenly swerved off the I-5, diving into the concrete canyons beneath the freeway overpass. He parked in the deepest shadow, cut the engine, and killed the lights. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hiss of traffic above. "What is he doing?" Maya whispered, her own voice startling her. Tate ignored her. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a hard-shell case. He popped it open. Inside was a small, 4-rotor drone, a cheap commercial model. "Just making sure your new friends aren't following." He launched the drone from the driver's side window. It ascended quickly, a cluster of angry red and green lights, rising above the overpass to scan the highway behind them. "He's got a bird in the air," Jules reported, his voice tight. "We're exposed." On the convergence table, a new icon appeared, the drone. "Finch," Cassian said, turning to the shadows where his hacker sat, illuminated only by the glow of 6 monitors. "That's a Skylink consumer model. Can you take it?" Finch, a man who looked barely out of his teens, cracked his knuckles. "Can a fish swim? He's running it off a burner phone's unsecured hotspot. He's basically inviting me in. Give me 10 seconds. The drone's video feed populated a screen on Finch's wall. It showed Jules's sedan, stark and obvious, parked just 2 blocks back. "Jules, pull into the bus lane. Lights off, now," Cashin commanded. "On it," Finch said. "I have control," rebooting his video feed. In Tate's car, the phone screen displaying the drone's view flickered for a second. When it returned, the highway behind them was clear. Finch was feeding him a looped video, a clean, empty stretch of road he'd captured just moments before. "Sloppy," Jules muttered over the comms, watching Tate's drone hover uselessly. "He's not sloppy," Cashin countered, his eyes on the map. "He's cheap. He thinks he's the only one smart enough to use technology." Tate watched his screen for another 30 seconds, satisfied. "All clear." He landed the drone, packed it away, and merged back onto the highway, this time heading east, toward the I-90 bridge. He glanced at Maya. "Now, for our insurance policy." He held his phone out, pressing record on a voice memo app. "You're going to say the following: 'My name is Maya Rowan. I'm with Tate Riker of my own free will. We're going on a road trip.' Say it." Maya stared at the phone. Her mind raced. A denial would earn her a backhand, or worse. She had to comply, but she had to fight. As she opened her mouth, she heard the faint, automated announcement from the approaching light rail. She took a breath and spoke, her voice shaking just enough to be convincing. "My name is Maya Rowan." She paused, letting the automated voice bleed into the recording. Now arriving, Wassa Stadium Station. She continued, I'm with Tate Riker, of my own free will. Just as she finished, the digital chime of the station clock struck the hour. We're going on a road trip. Tate snatched the phone back, satisfied. Good girl. The audio file arrived in Cashin's inbox seconds later, captured by the live surveillance on Tate's burner. Cassian played it over the speakers. Finch isolated the background noise immediately. Link light rail, stadium station announcement, and the clock chime. That puts their exact position 3 minutes ago crossing the I-90 interchange. He's heading east, definitely east. The holographic map zoomed out, showing the I-90 stretching over the mountains. He's running, Rhea said. He must be heading for the exchange point. Switch yard, Dakota line. It sounds like a rail hub. He won't get far, Cassian said. He picked up his own phone, dialing a number from a secure list. This is Vale. Yes, activate Protocol 12. I need a ghost checkpoint, Bureau of Interstate Racketeering, random weight inspection. Set it up on I-90, just before the Snoqualmie Summit. Full lights, no lethal. I want to rattle his cage, not break it. 50 miles ahead of Tate, a pair of black and white SUVs, officially registered to the non-existent Bureau of Interstate Racketeering, pulled out of a hidden garage. They rolled onto the highway, flipped on their bright red and blue lights, and set up a convincing, official-looking checkpoint. In Tate's car, the flashing lights appeared suddenly over a rise. Damn it, Tate hissed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. A checkpoint? I can't risk a stop. He slammed on the brakes, cutting the wheel hard, and dove down an unlit exit ramp. Tires squealing in protest. The sign read, Ciela Elam. On the convergence table, Finch highlighted the new route. He took the bait. He's off the main highway, heading for the secondary roads. He's going to the ground. Good, Cassian said, his voice a flat line. He just told us where he's sleeping tonight. He watched the red dot of Tate's car move through the dark. Digital mountains. Jules, fall back. Let him think he's safe. We own the night. The cabin was buried deep in the Cascade foothills, miles off the main road in Celiellum, smelling of damp wool and old pine. Tate shoved Maya toward the tiny kitchen, the metal of a single handcuff chaining her left wrist to the iron stove handle. The chain was perhaps 3 feet long. Cook, he ordered, tossing a plastic bag of groceries onto the warped Formica counter. He sat at the small dinette table, his gun now placed casually beside his elbow. Maya's hands trembled, but her mind was clear, methodical. She was a prisoner, but she was not passive. She cataloged everything: the flimsy back door, the single window over the sink, the weight of the cast iron skillet. She pulled out a container of coarse salt. As she moved between the counter and the stove, she let her hand dip, spilling a small, steady stream onto the dark, dirty floorboards. It was messy, easily overlooked by a man like Tate, who saw the world through a screen. But for anyone looking, anyone tracking, it was a perfect, sharp arrow pointing directly at the back door. She left the crumbs. She only hoped someone was following. The terror was a physical weight, pressing on her chest, trying to steal her breath. She saw him watching her, his eyes cold and assessing, like she was livestock. The urge to scream, to collapse, was overwhelming. She fought it. She stood at the sink, her back to him, and forced the air into her lungs. Inhale. 4 counts. Hold. 4 counts. Exhale. 4 counts. Hold. 4 counts. The box breathing, the world stopped shrinking. The panic receded, contained. In her pocket, her fingers closed around a sharp edge. It was a shard of plastic, broken from the cheap, faceted button on her cuff in the car. She had worked at it for an hour, twisting and worrying the plastic until it cracked, hiding the small piece in the seam of her jeans. It wasn't a knife, but it was a promise. Tate, meanwhile, was high on his own success, energized by the clean getaway. You have no idea how lucky you are, he mused, wiping down his pistol with an oilcloth. You're not just some street commodity. You're going to the Chancellor. Maya kept her focus on the skillet, the sizzle of the cheap beef, a cover for the frantic beating of her heart. "He runs the entire northern grid for the glass orchard," Tate bragged. "We're moving past messy, physical transportation. He's standardizing the body cloud contract, all your data, your biometrics, your physical profile, encrypted and tokenized. You're not a person anymore. You're a clean asset, instantly transferable." He laughed, a dry, clicking sound. "This is the future." He took off his jacket and threw it over the back of his chair. A set of keys fell from the pocket, attached to a heavy, brushed titanium USB drive. The metal was laser engraved with sleek, sterile letters, SR91. Maya's breath hitched. SR91. The code had been in the email signature, the job posting for a logistics coordinator at a new shipping firm, the one that had paid for her flight to Seattle, the one that had seemed too good to be true. This wasn't one man. This was a corporation. At Pier 47, Cashin watched the convergence table. A single thermal signature glowed from a satellite feed. He's in a rental cabin. Deep woods, he's off the grid, and he knows it. "The BIR checkpoint was a ghost," Rhea said, her face taut. "We can't run that play again. It's too loud. If he suspects we're anything other than local cops, he'll erase her." Cassian stared at the glowing dot. Satellite tracking was useless now. It told him where Tate was, not what he was doing. He needed ears inside. "We go gray. There's a local telecom co-op that services those mountains. I want you to buy an 8-hour emergency maintenance window on their fiber optic cable, the one that runs past that access road." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "Buy it. Buy it, lease it, break it. I don't care." Cassian said, "Finch, get a signal tap ready. We're plugging directly into the main line." 2 hours later, Rhea and another operative, disguised as hikers in bright technical gear, discovered a frayed connection in a junction box half a mile from the cabin. While they pretended to report the outage, Rhea planted a thermal and acoustic sensor on the property's fence line. The signal fed back to the pier. "2 heat signatures confirmed," Finch announced. "One is elevated, moving, consistent with Tate. The other, it's erratic. Body temp is fluctuating. Adrenaline spikes and crashes. She's terrified, but she's fighting it. She's not frozen." Tate's burner phone rang, the harsh electronic sound slicing the cabin's quiet. He picked it up. Yeah, I'm Dark. The checkpoint was a problem, but I'm clear." Maya was at the sink, her back to him, scrubbing the skillet. "Confirming the switch yard," Tate said, his voice dropping. The Fargo Freight Hub understood. Rail transfer. Tomorrow, 2000. Fargo. They were moving her across the country. The floor dropped out from beneath her. A cough, violent and real, seized her. She doubled over, hacking, the sound tearing from her lungs. "Sorry," she choked out. The wood smoke." Tate waved her off, disgusted. "Just shut up." Her coughing fit was a perfect mask. Her cuffed hand, hidden by her body, was at her waist. Her thumb found the tiny, flat disc Cassian had slipped into her palm when he'd handed her that second napkin. A move so slick, even she had barely felt it. It was a dormant GPS tracker, no bigger than a dime. Her cough covered the sound of her thumbnail pressing the micro switch. Holding it for 3 agonizing seconds, a single, silent vibration against her skin confirmed it was active. "Find me. Please, find me." Night fell, cold and absolute. Tate finished eating and shoved her into the single, tiny bedroom. He cut the handcuff from the stove, only to replace it with a thick plastic zip tie around her wrists. He looped another tie through that one, securing her to the heavy, iron bed frame. He left it just loose enough to show his arrogance. He didn't see her as a threat. She waited. She listened until the sound of his breathing in the main room settled into a slow, heavy rhythm. Silently, she worked her hands, maneuvering the tiny, sharp shard of plastic from her pocket. She twisted her body, pulling the zip tie taut against the bed frame, and began to saw at the thick plastic. She scraped, she dragged the edge. The plastic was too dense, the glass shard too brittle. She worked until her fingers were raw, but the tie held. With a final, desperate twist, the shard snapped, the tiny blade skittering across the floor, lost in the dark. A raw, hot tear of frustration burned a track down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. She wouldn't break. Breathe. Four. She changed tactics. She couldn't cut, but she could write. She still had the base of the broken button, a hard piece of jagged plastic. She reached under the cheap wooden headboard, her fingers finding a patch of rough, unfinished pine. Masked by the sound of the wind rattling the window frame, she began to scratch. A long, deep gouge, then another, angled to meet the first. It was slow, agonizing work, the sound barely audible even to her own ears. A single letter, scratched into the wood where no one would ever look. V. It wasn't a clue. It was a prayer. V for veil. The thermal image on the convergence table was a picture of a cage, 2 glowing signatures, one pacing, one static. Pier 47 was silent, the only sound the hum of the servers. A breach is too hot, Cassian said, his voice flat, final. He'll kill her before we get through the door. A sniper is impossible. The window is too small. He's expecting force. So, we don't use force, Rhea Morose replied, stepping up beside him. Men like Tate Riker, the ones who call people assets, they have a fundamental weakness. They're greedy. They believe they're smarter than everyone else. Cassian looked at her. The bait. The bait, she confirmed. Finch, what did you find on that SR-91 drive? Finch spun in his chair. It's a token, a key to a much larger encrypted database. The drive itself is just the handshake, but Tate doesn't know that. He thinks it is the prize. Good, Cassian said. Rhea, set it up. A new buyer, anonymous, high priority, routed through the glass orchard. Offer him $50,000 in crypto for the drive. Not for the girl, for the drive. Finch's fingers were already moving. I'm on it. I've got his public wallet address from the burner. I can't just send him funds. He'll run. You won't, Rhea said. You'll send him a smart contract. A deposit of $25,000 locked. The contract only executes the wallet, only unlocks when his device pings the GPS coordinates of a specific location. He has to show up in person to get paid. The location, Cassian asked. Ellensburg Yard, Rhea said, the holographic map zooming in on a sprawling, desolate rail yard 80 miles east. It's open, multiple escape routes, and completely dead at this hour. He'll think it's a safe place for a quiet deal. In the cabin, Tate's burner phone chimed with a high-priority notification. He read the message from the Glass Orchard Marketplace. His eyes widened. $50,000 for the drive he'd been planning to give away as part of the deal. He looked at Maya, then at the USB. He could sell the data, then sell the girl in Fargo, double the profit. He checked the contract, a locked deposit. He had to be at the Ellensburg yard to receive the funds. It was on the way. Change of plans, he snapped, grabbing Maya by the arm and cutting the zip tie from the bed. You just got a bonus payday. He hauled her out into the pre-dawn cold and shoved her into the car. Tate drove fast, his focus on the money, his caution forgotten. He didn't see the 2 dark, heavy-duty pickup trucks, one driven by Jules, one by Rhea, fall in line 5 miles behind him. They didn't push. They just followed. 2 shadows locking the wind, blending in with the sparse, early morning truck traffic. The Ellensburg yard was a graveyard of steel. Rusting boxcars sat on dead-end tracks, and piles of scrap metal formed jagged, mountainous skylines against the gray. Rainy dawn. The wind was a physical force, howling through the empty cars, carrying a biting mist. Tate parked near a set of loading conveyors, his phone in his hand, the wallet app open. Connecting. The app read, Error. Geolocation not precise. Move to designated coordinates. A yellow dot flashed on his screen, indicating the center of the yard. Damn it, Tate snarled. He got out of the car, pulling Maya with him. Stay close. He walked 20 yards, holding the phone up. It chimed. Wallet unlocked. Funds pending. Awaiting second factor authorization. What second factor? Tate whispered. A voice cut through the wind. That would be me. Tate spun. Cassian Vale stood 30 yards away, hands empty, his black coat whipping in the wind. He was alone. Tate reacted instantly. He grabbed Maya, spinning her around, and pressed the cold, hard edge of a ceramic knife against her throat. It's a setup, I knew it. He fumbled at his belt with his free hand, pulled out a road flare, and cracked it. It ignited with a blinding, sizzling magnesium white light, bathing the yard in a hellish, sputtering glare. You move, she dies. There's no setup. Tate, Cassian said, his voice calm, carrying easily over the wind. He didn't move. The crypto is gone. You were chasing a ghost, but the offer is real. What offer? Tate screamed, the smoke and rain stinging his eyes. You have something of mine. The SR-91. Cassian held up the identical titanium USB drive, the one Finch had cloned. You're holding a copy. I'm holding the original, the key, the thing the Chancellor actually wants. Tate stared, his mind racing, trying to process the shift in power. Let her go, Cassian said, and you can have it, the real drive, and a 5-minute head start, my word. Tate's eyes darted between Cassian, the drive, and the darkness. This was his prize. This was his escape. Throw it here, and I'll let her go. I throw it. You kill her, Cassian said, taking one slow step forward. I'll meet you halfway. The wind howled, a banshee's wail. Tate was distracted, his greed focused entirely on the small metal object in Cassian's hand. He eased his grip on Maya, shifting his weight, ready to lunge for the drive. It was the moment Maya had been waiting for. For the last hour, she'd been methodically, painfully, working the new zip tie on her wrists against the sharp metal latch of the seatbelt housing. The plastic was frayed, thin. As Tate took a step, pulling her with him, Maya planted her feet, ripped her hands apart with a final, desperate surge of adrenaline. The plastic snapped. Before Tate could even register the movement, she dropped her center of gravity, ducked under his knife arm, and threw herself sideways in a roll, landing hard on the gravel next to a dormant conveyor belt. Now, Cassian yelled. The sound of the shot was a dull thump. Not a gunshot, but a high-pressure pneumatic launcher. From a perch atop a stack of containers, Rhea fired. A canister hit the front axle of Tate's sedan and exploded, engulfing the wheel in a tidal wave of thick, sticky foam that began to harden instantly. Tate screamed, a sound of pure animal rage. He saw Maya scrambling. He saw his car disabled. He saw Cassian moving, not toward him, but toward her. He'd lost. He fired 2 wild shots from a pistol, the bullets sparking uselessly off a steel girder, and then he sprinted, disappearing into the labyrinth of rusting train cars. Cassian reached Maya, pulling her up from the gravel, his hands strong and steady on her arms. Are you hit? She was shaking, soaked from the rain, her wrists raw and bleeding, but she was standing. No, she gasped. No, I'm okay. Jules ran past them. Stopping where Tate had stood, he knelt and picked up a small, black burner phone, dropped in panic. He held it up. He left his lifeline. The drive back was silent, the armored SUV a pocket of warmth against the storm. Cassian sat opposite her, watching. He handed her a sealed bottle of water and a sterile bandage from a kit beneath the seat. When she finished cleaning her wrists, he finally spoke. His voice was low, devoid of pressure. Jules can have you back in Seattle in 90 minutes. We can drop you at your apartment or a hotel. You'll be home. You'll be safe. He paused, letting the offer settle. Or, we'll finish this. Maya looked at the small, black phone Jules had placed on the console. She thought of the cold-blooded bragging. Chancellor, Glass Orchard, Body Cloud. She thought of the cargo hub in Fargo. She knew this wasn't over. It had only just begun. She met Cassian's gaze, her own reflection staring back at her in his steel-gray eyes. She took a long, steadying drink of water and placed the bottle down. We finish it. Sunfall was not a house. It was a fortress disguised as a piece of modern art, all glass and cedar, perched high on a cliff overlooking Spokane. The city was a distant glitter, a world away. Inside, there was no damp pine or fear. There was only the scent of antiseptic and brewing coffee. A quiet, older man who introduced himself only as Dr. Aris had just finished stitching a shallow cut on Maya's forearm, the one she'd gotten during her tumble on the conveyor. He worked with gentle efficiency, his movements economical. Cassian stood by the window, his back to them, watching the rain begin to lash against the glass. He had not crowded her, had not hovered. "The abrasions on your wrists are clean, doctor," Aris said, applying a final bandage. "They will scar, but not badly. You were lucky." "Thank you," Maya murmured, her voice hoarse. Aris nodded to Cassian. "She's in shock, but she's strong. She needs rest and calories. I'll leave the supplies on the counter." He packed his bag and, just as silently, let himself out. Cassian turned, his gaze unreadable. He gestured to the sterile white gauze. He said to change that dressing before morning. "May I see—" She held out her arm. He didn't just take it. His fingers hovered for a fraction of a second. A question? She nodded. He touched her then. His hold incredibly light, his thumb brushing the edge of the bandage. His hands were warm, steady. It was the touch of a craftsman, not a brute. He was just checking the doctor's work. He released her just as quickly. "Kitchen's this way. You need to eat." Night fell hard. The storm, which had chased them across the state, slammed into Spokane with renewed fury. They sat in the cavernous living room, Maya wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket, a bowl of soup untouched on the table before her. And then, with a heavy thunk, the power died. The lights, the faint hum of the climate control, the digital displays all gone. The darkness was absolute, a sudden, suffocating press that brought the cabin back. Maya's breath hitched. A tremor started in her hands, one she couldn't stop. It wasn't the cold, it was the silence, the dark. It was the memory of the zip tie, the iron bed frame, the feeling of being utterly, hopelessly trapped. A match flared, sulfur and light. Cassian was in front of her, his face illuminated from below as he lit a thick pillar candle on the coffee table. The flame caught, casting their shadows, long and dancing. On the walls, he lit two more. "The backup generator will kick in," he said, his voice calm. "But it can take a minute. Let's move to the kitchen. It's smaller, warmer." He led the way, the single candle in his hand. The kitchen was a sleek expanse of marble and steel, now softened by the flickering light. He set the candle down. The tremor in Maya's hands had spread, a deep, rattling shiver that shook her whole frame. "It's just the cold," she lied, her teeth chattering. Cassian turned, unzipped the heavy wool coat he'd been wearing, and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, smelling faintly of the rain and something else, soap, leather, him. The warmth was immediate, but it was the weight that helped. It was an anchor. His hand rested on her shoulder for a moment, a brief, solid pressure. "You're safe," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. His shoulder brushed hers as he sat on the stool beside her. They sat in the candlelight, the storm a dull roar outside. "I used to want to be a tattoo artist," Maya said, the words tumbling out into the quiet. "A medical tattooist, for people for survivors, reconstructive work, scar coverage, giving people back the parts of themselves that were stolen. A way to reclaim their own skin." She laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Funny, right?" Cassian looked at her, his expression serious in the dancing light. "It's not funny. It's necessary." He paused, his gaze dropping to the flame. "My father did business with men like Tate, men who traded in flesh. He saw them as just another commodity. I saw the results." He looked up, his eyes locking with hers. The gray turned to charcoal in the dark. "When I took over the Northlight Syndicate, I made one rule. It is the only rule that matters. We don't trade in people. Ever. We don't buy them. We don't sell them. We don't transport them. We don't look the other way." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty. It was filled with everything they weren't saying. He wasn't just a criminal. She wasn't just a victim. His hand, resting on the counter, was inches from hers. He didn't move. She was the one who shifted, her fingers brushing his. It was the smallest of movements, but it changed everything. He turned his hand over, his palm facing up, an offering, not a demand. She placed her hand in his. His fingers laced through hers, a slow, deliberate clasp. He watched her face, searching her eyes, giving her every second to pull away. She didn't. He leaned in. The kiss was so slow it barely qualified as one at first. It was just a soft press of lips. A question. She leaned into it, a small, shaky breath escaping her. His other hand came up, not to grab, but to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. It was a kiss of reassurance. Not of passion, it was about shared breath, not stolen air. She felt his heartbeat, steady and strong against her. Or perhaps it was her own. Hammering against her ribs, it was a promise of partnership, a silent vow. Then the kiss deepened, a new warmth spreading through her, chasing away the last of the icy fear. It became a search, a confirmation. You are real. I am real. We are here. She felt the edge of the panic, the feeling of being overwhelmed, and she whispered against his mouth, "Slow down." He stopped, instantly. He didn't pull back, but the pressure eased. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that lit his eyes. He rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. "Okay," he whispered, "slow." He just held her, their hands still clasped, his coat still a heavy, protective weight on her shoulders. The generators never kicked in. They didn't need them. In the bright, clinical light of morning. Maya woke up on a sofa, Cassian's coat still draped over her. He was at the kitchen island, a phone to his ear, a fresh pot of coffee brewing. She stood up, walked over to him, and placed her hand on his forearm. He stopped talking, turning to look at her. "I'm okay," she said, her voice clear, firm. "We continue." He nodded, his eyes approving. He turned back to the phone. "Finch, report." The news was stark. Tate's burner was the key. Finch's voice crackled from the speaker. "I'm in. The SR-91 wasn't just a key. It's a schematic. It's a whole marketplace." He called it the body cloud. It's a logistics system for biometric data, linked to a central transport hub. "Let me guess," Cassian said, his jaw tightening. "Fargo." "Fargo Freight Hub," Finch confirmed. "Codename Switchyard. This chancellor isn't just a broker. He's building an Amazon for human trafficking. And Tate's phone just got a new message, sent 5 minutes ago. A final payment, contingent on delivery of the asset. Him and you, Maya." "He'll never get to Fargo," Cassian stated. "We'll cut him off. We hit the transport chain. We hit his wallet. We bleed him dry." "No," Maya said. Cassian turned, raising an eyebrow. You cut him off. He just finds another route," she said, her voice hard as the marble counter. "You have to destroy the hub. You have to destroy the data. And I'm going with you." "Maya, that's not..." "He called me the asset. Tate called me cargo. I am not a package to be protected. I was inside his system. I saw the drive. I heard the codes. You need a way in, a way to move without being noticed." She looked him dead in the eye. "You need a trail marker. I'll be your map." Tate Riker was running on fumes and raw terror. He'd driven a stolen pickup truck 600 miles, dumping his burner phone in the Yellowstone River. But he knew they were still watching. He was a ghost being hunted by shadows. He made it to Sioux Falls, to a sterile corporate high-rise that pulsed with the hum of servers, the regional hub for the glass orchard. He was brought to a conference room where the chancellor appeared, not in person, but on a 40-foot-high video screen. The face was an androgynous, digitally smoothed avatar. The voice was like synthesized ice. "You have failed, Mr. Riker," the voice said. "You lost the asset and you compromised the SR-91 protocol." It was a setup," Tate pleaded, his voice cracking. "It was Vale, Northlight. I can get her back. I know where he's going." "We are aware," the Chancellor said, a flicker of digital annoyance. "Your tracker is still active. Though you were foolish enough to discard your phone, you have become a liability. However, you have one final opportunity to clear your debt." A new map appeared on the screen. Fargo. Deliver the original asset Maya Rowan to Switchyard LX42 at the designated time. Do this, and your contract is cleared. Fail, and it will be terminated permanently. Tate was no longer a broker. He was a tool, given one last function. While Tate was being debriefed, the Northlight Syndicate was already in motion, a steel net closing across 3 states. They split into 3 cells. Jules took a team to Billings, Montana. Their job was to be loud. They initiated a series of anonymous tips about a rival smuggling ring, flooding the local freight yards with legitimate law enforcement, creating a massive, chaotic diversion that would draw Glass Orchard's local surveillance. Further east in Bismarck, North Dakota, Rhea and her team, dressed as railroad maintenance, moved silently through the sprawling container depot. They weren't diverting. They were infiltrating. Using schematics Finch had pulled, they planted microcameras on key refrigerated containers scheduled for the same route as their target. The third cell was the spear tip. Cassian and Maya drove a nondescript SUV, blending in with the tourists heading toward the Badlands. In the back, Maya worked, not with a computer, but with a box of heavy-grade railroad chalk. "They'll be moving fast, in the dark," she explained, her voice quiet, focused. "We need a language they can read at a glance." She drew on a map. A double arrow horizontal means clear path or proceed. A triangle of 3 dots means hold or danger. And this? She drew a single sharp V with a line through it. This means target identified. Vale, my mark. They drove into Theodore Roosevelt National Park, the landscape changing to vast, painted canyons and desolate plains. They needed to scout a known drone refueling station for the Glass Orchard's long-range surveillance. They found it disguised as a derelict Sinclair gas station near the edge of the park. As they sat in the truck, watching, a sleek, black drone, far more advanced than Tate's, descended from the sky. It landed on the roof, where a hidden panel opened to swap its battery. Suddenly, the drone's optical sensor swiveled, its blue lens panning across the parking lot, directly at them. "It sees us," Maya said, her voice tight. "Don't move," Cassian said, his voice low. He put the truck in park and cut the engine. "We're just tourists, pulling over." The drone didn't move. It was studying them, its facial recognition software likely cross-referencing them against a database. "The sun visor," Cassian said. "Pull it down, slowly." Maya reached up, but the visor wouldn't cover her. The drone repositioned, angling for a clearer shot. In one fluid motion, Cassian unbuckled, leaned across the center console, and pulled her toward him. He pressed her head against his chest, his arm wrapping around her, his hand shielding the back of her head. He bent his own head down, his face buried in her hair, his body a shield to the drone. They were just another couple, lost in a passionate embrace, hiding from the world under the awning of a gas station. But it was not just tactical. Maya's ear was pressed against his chest, the solid, steady thump-thump of his heart a counterpoint to her own frantic pulse. His hand was warm on her head. She was surrounded by the scent of him, leather and clean wool. It was an embrace of pure, tactical necessity, and yet it was the safest she had felt in her entire life. She closed her eyes, just for a second, and held on. The drone's blue light scanned them for 10 agonizing seconds. Then, apparently satisfied, it lifted off and disappeared over the canyon rim. Cassian didn't let go immediately. He waited, his breathing slow and even. "It's gone?" he murmured into her hair. He pulled back, his eyes searching hers, the professional calm returning, but not entirely. The air in the truck was thick with what had just passed. Back at Pier 47, Finch's voice crackled over the secure line, breaking the tension. "I've been digging at that SR91 code. It's not just a file name. It's a set of coordinates, latitude and longitude. It points to a dead zone just outside Fargo, North Dakota. I pulled the satellite and property records. It's an old defunct grain co-op. Larkspur Feed and Grain. That's our switchyard." Tate, now desperate, was also in North Dakota. He knew he couldn't just walk into switchyard. He needed access. In a reckless, frantic move, he stalked and cornered a low-level paymaster for Chancellor's network, kidnapping him from a bar in Grand Forks. He traded the man's life for his encrypted key card. The act was a death warrant. Chancellor's network lit up. Finch intercepted the new order. Tate Riker has gone rogue. He is to be allowed to deliver the asset. Then he is to be sanitized. Wiped from the books. They're going to kill him the second she's inside. Cassian's face hardened. He looked at the map, his mind processing the new intelligence. "It's a clean solution. Tate is now our Trojan horse. He functions as our diversion. He gets Maya inside the perimeter. We use his desperation as a weapon. Once he hands her over and they move to sanitize, we hit them. We extract Maya in the chaos." Maya turned on him, her eyes flashing with a cold fire he hadn't seen before. "No. Maya, it's the simplest tactic. Nanata." "No," she said again, her voice shaking with anger. "You are not going to use him as bait. You are not going to send him in to be executed. I will not be extracted. I am not an asset, and he, as disgusting as he is not a Trojan horse. He's a person. We are not them. We don't sacrifice people." Cassian stared at her, genuinely surprised. He saw the logic. Tate was the enemy, a tool to be used and discarded. She saw a line they could not cross. "We go in with him," she insisted. "We find a way to save us both, or we don't go." There was a long silence. He was the boss, the strategist. His way was clean, logical, and ruthless. Her way was messy, complicated, and dangerous. It was also, he realized, the only right way. The only way that separated Northlight from the glass orchard. "All right," Cassian said to her, his voice softer. "A new plan. We save you both. Finch, Rhea. We're changing the objective. This is no longer an extraction. It's a rescue." Maya watched him, the respect in her eyes a new, powerful thing. He had yielded, not to a subordinate, but to a partner. The Larkspur Feed and Grain Co-op looked dead from the highway, a cluster of towering concrete silos and rusting metal sheds against the flat Dakota horizon. But as the sun dipped, the perimeter fences hummed with electricity. A 17-ton grain tanker, leased that afternoon under a shell corporation, rumbled up to the main freight gate. The guard, bored, waved it through for the 8 p.m. grain waste pickup. The truck parked in the designated zone, a blind spot between two silos. As the shift change whistle blew and workers trudged toward the time clock, a hidden panel in the tanker's undercarriage unlatched. Cassian dropped first, melting into the shadow. Rhea followed, a ghost in black tactical gear. Finally. Cassian reached up and helped Maya down. Her face was pale, set in a mask of cold determination. The yard was a maze of stacked shipping containers, a steel canyon designed to confuse and control movement. Cassian took the lead, but Maya was the guide. She held a small piece of rebar. Every few yards, she tapped it against the corrugated steel walls. Tap, tap, pause, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. The sound was lost in the ambient clang of the yard, but for the team, it was a lifeline. The 213 code. The signal he had given her in the alley. It was their language. Across the yard, at the designated exchange point LX42, Tate Riker arrived on foot. He pushed a rattling dolly in front of him. On it sat a figure, hooded and bound in a burlap sack, a fake Maya, a store mannequin dressed in her clothes, scavenged from a dumpster. His plan was desperate. Get the key card from the paymaster. Get inside. Plan a virus on the terminal, and drain what crypto he could before the Chancellor's men realized he was alone. He stepped onto the illuminated way station, just as the instructions dictated. I have the asset, he yelled into the wind. The yard went dark, not just the lights, but the electronic hum, the magnetic locks, the cameras, everything Cassian. Hidden behind a stack of pallets, held the off switch on a military-grade EMP generator. In the control room, Finch was counting. Power is down, go! Tate was blinded. He heard the metallic shing of guns being readied in the darkness around him. He'd walked right into his own execution. He dropped the dolly and fumbled for his pistol. 47 seconds, Finch's voice said, timing the precise window before the capacitors reset. A magnetic lock on a maintenance door beside Tate clicked open an error code forced remotely by Finch. As the first flashlight beams cut the dark, an arm snaked out from the doorway, grabbed Tate by the collar, and yanked him into the pitch-black corridor. Tate felt the cold, hard circle of a suppressor press against the base of his skull. Move, and you're a statistic, Rhea's voice whispered, all ice. Want to live? Tate, shaking, could barely nod. Lead us to the server room, the real one, now. The lights and alarms blared back to life, exactly on time, but the corridor was empty. The hunters found only a toppled mannequin. Tate, propelled by Rhea's gun, led them through a sub-level of concrete tunnels. He used the stolen keycard, his hands shaking so badly Cassian had to steady them. The final door hissed open, revealing a room bathed in the blue, cold light of data. The body cloud. It was a vast, climate-controlled chamber lined with rows and rows of black server racks. Each blinking LED represented a life, a person's biometric data, cataloged and stored, ready for sale. Maya's breath hitched. She saw her own face flash on a monitor, listed as Asset Rowan M. Status Pending Transfer. She stumbled, and Cassian's hand was there, steadying her elbow. Just the codes. Maya, that's all we need. She nodded, took a deep breath, and walked to the main terminal. She began to read, her voice shaking but clear. Code SR91, code SR112, code TR80. She read the file names of the other victims she had seen in Tate's files, the ones listed for the same transport. For Finch, this was the rescue key. A massive screen at the far end of the room flickered to life, and the Chancellor's smooth, synthesized face appeared. A bold move. Mr. Vale, impressive. But you are merely a physical solution to a digital problem. Rhea and Cassian didn't stop. They moved down the racks, planting small, brick-shaped devices. We should be allies. Northlight. The Chancellor's calm voice echoed, We are both in the logistics business. You move commodities. I move to a cleaner, more profitable commodity. Cassian paused, looking directly at the camera. We have a rule, he said, Basi, his voice as cold as the room. We don't ally with people who view human beings as commodities. A pity, the Chancellor said. Your morality is expensive. Payload is set, Rhea announced. Finch, Cassian said, light it up. Done, Finch's voice replied. The devices didn't explode. They activated. A high-pitched whine filled the air. The servers began to smoke, not from fire, but from catastrophic, targeted overload. The payload wasn't a bomb. It was a digital plague. It wasn't just erasing the data. It was simultaneously decrypting the victims' core files and blasting alerts names, locations, and safety warnings to every law enforcement agency and safety network Finch had tapped into. Backup power in 30 seconds, Rhea warned, pulling Tate toward the exit. Chancellor Cassian called out, pausing at the door. The avatar's face was frozen, the system crashing. Your enterprise is liquidated. They ran, retracing their steps through the tunnels as the whine of the dying servers reached a screaming crescendo. They burst out of the maintenance door and into the grain tanker's hidden bay, just as the facility's main generator roared to life, flooding the yard with useless light. The grain truck pulled out of the gate, the driver nodding to the guard. As it merged onto the dark highway, they looked back. Larkspur feed and grain was intact. There were no flames, no casualties, but from the roof vents, Thick, acrid plumes of black smoke poured into the night sky, the unmistakable smell of billions of data points and an entire criminal empire, burning to ash from the inside out. Inside the cramped, vibrating darkness of the grain tanker, Tate Riker was balled up behind a bulkhead, his hands zip-tied. He was a piece of cargo, just as he had treated Maya. He heard them talking in the main compartment, their voices low but clear over the rumble of the highway. "You should have left me," Tate heard himself say, though he didn't speak. It was Maya's voice. Tactically, he was right. Then Cassian's, "The tactics were wrong. It's the only rule. Maya, we don't leave people behind, not even him." "We saved him. Cassian," she said, her voice full of a strange, weary strength. "That's the difference." Tate closed his eyes. Saved him. The words didn't compute. They were a foreign code, and they unlocked something he'd kept buried for a decade, a sickening, heavy wave of guilt, immediately followed by a desperate, clawing will to live. Their next safe house was a sterile, extended-stay motel in Grand Forks. The victory at Larkspur felt hollow. The beast was wounded. Not dead, Finch, his voice tinny over a secure speaker, confirmed it. "It's bad, boss. The Chancellor just emptied his accounts. He's put a $5 million bounty on your head. Public, every broker, every gun for hire from here to Chicago just got the alert. You're the most valuable target on the continent." "He's running," Rhea said, cleaning her pneumatic launcher. "No," Cassian said, staring at the rain-lashed window. "He's consolidating. He's burning his network to fund a war." As if on cue, Cassian's secure phone buzzed. Not a number, but a secure VoIP call. He answered. "Mr. Vale," a voice said, impossibly smooth, with no trace of an accent. "This is Agent Thorne with the Western Crime Directorate. It seems we have a mutual, and very public, interest in the party known as Chancellor. We've been tracking his financial movements for some time. We believe it's in our best interest to pool our resources." Cassian's eyes narrowed. "I've never heard of the Western Crime Directorate." "We prefer it that way," Thorne said with a polite chuckle. "We're requisitioning your data on the Fargo hub. In exchange, we can offer you federal protection and safe passage." "We don't cooperate with agencies we don't know," Cassian said, "and we don't need your protection." He ended the call. "WDWCD," Rhea asked. "A ghost," Cassian said. "Another arm of the Chancellor? A trap. We leave. Now." They moved in 2 vehicles, Cassian, Maya, and Tate in a reinforced SUV, Rhea and Jules in a lead scout sedan. The trap snapped shut 3 blocks from the motel. 2 black, identical SUVs. No plates. Materialized from a side street, boxing them in with professional, practiced ease. "They're hurting us," Cassian said, his voice dropping as he spun the wheel, heading for the industrial park. "They want us off the main roads." Over the comms, Rhea's voice was tight. "They're flanking you. Cassian, they're trying to force you into the rail yard. It's a kill box." Maya, in the back seat, saw it on the map. She also saw something else. "There," she pointed. "A scrapyard, 2 miles north. It's a maze. We can lose them there." "They'll follow us in," Cassian countered, swerving to avoid a T-bone. "I know," Maya said. She grabbed her comm. "Rhea, that scrapyard. I can draw them in. I'll be the bait. Get your gear ready." "Maya, no." Cassian's voice was a roar. "That is a direct order. You stay in this vehicle." "I'm not on your payroll, Cassian," she said, her voice suddenly, shockingly calm. "Rhea, do it." Before Cassian could react, Rhea's sedan split off, tires smoking, taking the North Fork. As predicted, one of the black SUVs followed her. "The bait is set," Rhea said. The remaining SUV slammed into Cassian's rear quarter panel, a screech of tortured metal. Cassian fought for control, the wheel vibrating in his hands. The argument came later, in the relative safety of a freezing truck stop parking lot, the tension between them a visible, sparking wire. Cassian was furious, his control shattered not by the attack, but by the raw fear he'd felt watching her offer herself up. "That was a reckless, suicidal move," he snapped, his voice low and dangerous. "You are a civilian. You are done. I'm taking you off this board. Jules will drive you to a private airfield. You are going home." Maya, soaked and streaked with grease from the scrapyard, stepped right into his space. Her anger a match for his. Home what home? My apartment in Portland, where I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder waiting for another Tate Riker to offer me a job. You don't get to make that decision. "I'm trying to keep you alive." "And I am trying to live," she shot back. "You don't get to bench me, Cassian. You don't get to decide that I'm too fragile to finish what I started. This is my life." He put his hands on me. "I am finishing this at the root. I will not be standing on the sidelines ever again." "We have a problem." Ria's voice cut through their fight. She was at the laptop in the SUV, reviewing her drone footage from the scrapyard. "Tate, he's gone." Cassian's head snapped around. "What?" "During the chaos, when we were dealing with the WCD cars, he slipped his cuffs. He's in the wind, and he took the master key card he stole from the paymaster." Cassian slammed his fist against the side of the truck. "He betrayed us. After all that, he betrayed us." "No," Ria said, her eyes glued to the screen. She zoomed in on a grainy figure, running. Not toward the highway, not toward freedom. Look, he's not running away. He's running to him. That's the direction of the Chancellor's last known command location, the old packing plant. Maya moved to the screen, watching the small, desperate figure navigate the back alleys. Her anger at Cassian evaporated, replaced by a cold, sudden understanding. "He heard us," she whispered. "In the tanker. He knows the Chancellor will kill him. He knows we saved him. He's not running to join him. He's going to try and trade his life." She looked at Cassian, her eyes clear, the argument over. He's trying to atone, and he's the only one who knows the way into the final den. Cassian stared at the screen, at the man who had started it all, now running to his certain death. He hated that she was right. He hated the impossible, messy logic of it. "Fine," he said, the word like gravel. "We follow him, but the debate is over. From this point on, every door, every corner, every single dangerous decision. I go in first. That is not negotiable." Maya held his gaze, and for the first time, she nodded in silent, absolute agreement. Sillalok was not a building. It was a scar. A series of interconnected concrete grain silos abandoned on the Minnesota border, brooding over the flatlands of Moorhead. It was the physical manifestation of the dark web, a place of concrete and cold iron. Below the silos, buried deep in the frozen earth, was the Chancellor's final command bunker. They had tracked Tate there, watching from a distance as he used the stolen key card to access a rusted, subterranean hatch. He was walking into his own grave, a desperate man with nothing left to trade but his life. Tate descended into the bunker, the air thick with the smell of ozone and decay. The Chancellor was there, in the flesh, not an avatar, but a slight, unimposing man in a perfectly tailored suit, standing before a bank of monitors. He looked like an accountant. "Mr. Riker," the Chancellor said, his voice the same synthesized ice, even without the filter. "A bold, if foolish, final move?" "I have the key card," Tate stammered, holding it up. "I can be useful. I can find her. I know how Vale thinks." The Chancellor smiled, a thin, reptilian expression. "You are no longer useful. Mr. Riker, you are a loose end." He nodded to the two black-shirted guards flanking him. They moved, silent and efficient, raising suppressed pistols. The heavy steel hatch Tate had just entered exploded inward. Northlight breached, moving in a low, tight formation. They'd used the hatch, a weak point Maya had identified during a frantic, high-risk scout 12 hours earlier. Cassian had found the small, almost invisible V she had scratched into the rust near the hinge. They entered the main operations room, a concrete box lit by the cold blue of the monitors. The two guards swung their weapons toward the intruders. "A trap," the Chancellor sighed. looking bored, predictable. He touched a control on his desk. The steel doors slammed shut, and a heavy, low-frequency hum vibrated through the floor, an electromagnetic pulse trap. "Rhea, now," Cashin ordered. Rhea didn't hesitate. She threw 2 objects into the room. They weren't grenades. They were heavy. Neodymium magnets tied to long spools of thick copper wire. They slammed onto the metal walls, grounding the charge, the air crackling as the EM field shorted out. The Chancellor's eyes widened, his calm breaking for the first time. Clever. He hit another button. The main wall monitors lit up. It wasn't data. It was faces. Hundreds of them. Driver's license photos, candid shots, frightened selfies. The victims of the body cloud. The ones whose data had been erased but who were still lost. "They are just ghosts in the machine. Mr. Vale," the Chancellor said, his voice laced with contempt. "Data. You've accomplished nothing." Maya saw them, a young woman who looked like her, a teenage boy. Her breath caught. Her knees buckled, the sheer scale of the horror flooding her. "Maya!" Cassian's voice cut through the haze. He didn't look at the screen. He grabbed her hand, his grip like a steel anchor. "Look at me." She tore her eyes from the monitors and met his. His gaze was absolute, a shield. "They are not data," he said, his voice low and fierce. "For her alone, they are people, and we are here to finish this." He squeezed her hand, and her strength returned, flooding her, hot and sharp. "Finch!" Cashin yelled. "Lures are active," Finch's voice replied in their earpieces. The guards opened fire, but their aim was off. Finch was sending ghost signatures to their thermal scopes, tiny emitters creating false heat targets. The guards were shooting at shadows. Cassian moved, using the chaos, closing the distance. He stood 10 feet from the Chancellor. "You trade in human data. I'm here to erase your ledger." The Chancellor laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "The ledger is in my head, you fool." He slammed his hand down on a final red button, and this is the end of the line. The room did not explode. Instead, with a series of loud, concussive pops, the main power grid blew, the lights, the monitors, the faint hum of the servers. Everything died. They were plunged into a darkness so total it was physical, a heavy, suffocating black velvet. A single, panicked shot from one of the guards echoed deafeningly in the bunker. "Gas masks," Cashin ordered, his voice tight in the dark. "No," Maya whispered, grabbing his arm. "Smell it. Chlorine. It's the air filtration. The emergency exit." She took the lead, her hand locked in his. She moved through the pitch black, pulling him, following the acrid chemical scent. Rhea and the team followed. A chain of ghosts. They reached a wall, a junction. "Which way?" Rhea breathed. A tiny spark flared. Cashin flicked his Zippo lighter, the small, brave flame casting huge, dancing shadows. The light illuminated the wall in front of them. There, drawn in chalk, was the small triangle of 3 dots, the mark she had designed, the whole danger sign. He clicked the lighter off. The other way. He lit it again. Holding it high, they were in a narrow ventilation shaft. 10 feet ahead, the chalk mark was a double arrow. "Clear path." "There," Maya said, pointing up. "A ladder." It was a steep, iron-rung ladder, ascending into a black square that promised sky. "Rhea, Jules first," Cassian commanded. They scrambled up. "Tate, go." He cut the man's ties and shoved him at the ladder. "Maya, you're next. Go. Now." Maya climbed, her hands slick with sweat. She was halfway up when a hand like a vice clamped around her ankle. She screamed as she was ripped from the ladder, crashing back down to the concrete floor. The Chancellor stood over her, his face a pale mask in the gloom. The dark had been his ally. He held a long, thin combat knife to her throat. Cashin stood frozen at the base of the ladder. "Such a shame," the Chancellor hissed, pressing the blade just hard enough to sting. All that effort just to die in the dark. "Let her go." Cashin's voice was dead calm. He slowly unclipped his weapon and let it fall to the floor with a heavy, final clatter. He raised his empty hands. "Take me. That was the deal. I'll go first." The Chancellor smiled. Sensing victory, he eased the pressure on Maya, turning his head to savor his triumph over Vale. A shape launched itself from the absolute darkness of the corridor. Tate Riker. And he didn't yell, he didn't hesitate. He slammed into the Chancellor with the full force of his body, a desperate, redeeming lunge. The sound was a sick, wet tearing. Tate grunted, a sharp exhalation of air. He had taken the knife, the full length of the blade burying itself in his side. The point meant for Cassian. With his last ounce of strength, Tate grabbed Maya's jacket and threw her backward, shoving her toward Cassian. "Go!" he choked out, blood already on his lips. Above, Rhea, hearing the scream, aimed her weapon down into the dark. She saw the tangle of bodies. A single, suppressed shit echoed in the shaft. The Chancellor screamed, a high, thin sound. The knife clattered free. He fell back, clutching his hand, his weapon hand, now a ruin. The wail of sirens, distant at first, grew into a flood of red and blue lights washing over the Sillalok. Local police, acting on a detailed and anonymous tip from the Bureau of Interstate Racketeering, swarmed the facility. They found a scene they couldn't comprehend destroyed servers. A man in a $1,000 suit clutching a shattered hand, and a second man dead at the bottom of a ventilation shaft. As they cuffed the Chancellor, he looked past the officers, his eyes finding Cassian in the shadows. A small, cold smile touched his lips. "You've done nothing, Vale," he hissed, the synthetic smoothness gone, revealing a petty, human spite. "The data is backed up. The real ledger is safe in Zurich." A speaker on Rhea's tactical belt crackled to life. It was Finch, his voice echoing in the cold bunker. "No, it's not." The Chancellor's smile froze. "We've been live in your Zurich node for 20 minutes, Finch continued, his voice laced with triumph. "The erase payload just activated." On a nearby, still functioning monitor, a world map glowed. A red dot over Switzerland flickered, turned gray, and vanished. "Your body cloud is officially bankrupt, and by the way, the rescue manifests just went live. A lot of good agents just got very, very busy." They found Tate Riker leaning against the ventilation shaft, just below the ladder, his face pale in the light of their flashlights. The wound was too deep, the darkness spreading across his jacket. Maya knelt beside him, the anger she had felt for him gone, replaced by a profound, heavy sadness. He coughed, a wet, final sound. His eyes found hers. I heard you, in the tanker," he whispered, each word an effort. "You saved me. Why?" "We don't leave people behind," Maya said, her voice thick. A single, painful tear tracked through the grime on his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out, for starting all this. I wanted to be somebody." He fumbled for her hand. "Tell my mother in Spokane. Tell her. Tell her I tried. At the end, I tried." Maya took his hand. It was cold. She didn't offer him forgiveness. It wasn't hers to give, and it wouldn't be real. But she offered him peace. She held his hand firmly as the light faded from his eyes. "You're not alone," she whispered. He was gone. Cassian had wanted to fly her back to Seattle immediately, put her in a penthouse, and surround her with his security. She had refused. Instead, she stayed in a small, clean motel room in Moorhead for 2 weeks, working with the regional task force that Finch's data dump had mobilized. She sat with the survivors, the men and women pulled from the system. And she brought her dream to life in the motel's cramped conference room. She set up her sanitized equipment. She worked for free, her tattoo gun humming, covering the track marks, the brands, the scars. She gave them back their skin. On one young woman's arm, over a jagged scar, Maya inked a delicate, winding spray of bindweed, a flower that thrives in the hardest. Most broken ground. Her art was no longer a dream. It was a purpose. She finally returned to Seattle, not to her old life, but to his. The air on Bainbridge Island was sharp with salt and pine. They stood on a long, dark wooden pier, the lights of the city glittering like a fallen constellation across the water. The wind was gentle, pulling at her hair. For a long time, they just stood, sharing the silence. The war was over. The adrenaline was gone. "I have a safe house in Argentina," Cassian said, his voice quiet. "Not a command, just a fact. You would be safe there, forever." Maya looked at the dark, moving water. "I've spent the last month running, the last year running. I'm done running, and I'm done being safe." He turned to her, his gaze intense. "Then what do you want? Maya, for yourself, not for the survivors, not for me." She met his eyes, her voice clear and strong. "A life that no one else decides for me. I want to choose. I want to walk down the street in the sun. I want to fail on my own terms, and I want to tattoo bindweed on every person who needs it." He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "A good life." He moved closer. She didn't step back. He didn't pull her or grab her. He simply raised his hands and cupped her face, his thumbs resting on her cheekbones. The embrace was slow, earned. She leaned into his touch, her hands coming to rest on his chest. The kiss was soft, a deep, lingering promise. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of the kitchen. This was calm. It was a shared breath, a quiet alignment. She felt his heart beating, steady. He held her, his lips brushing her temple, whispering against her skin, "I'm here." She closed her eyes, her arms winding around his neck, holding him close. "You're safe," she whispered back, the words a promise of her own. He pulled back slightly. Reaching into his coat pocket, he pressed something cool and metal into her palm. "This isn't a chain," he said, his voice serious. "It's not an engagement. It's not a claim." She opened her hand. It was a small, heavy pendant of brushed platinum, shaped like a perfect, sharp triangle, a V. "It's a promise," he said, "of respect, a promise that I will always see you, and I will always honor your choices, even the ones I don't like." She smiled, closing her hand around the pendant. "We go slow," she said. "As slow as you want." The moment of peace hung in the air, perfect and fragile. And then it broke. Her phone, the new, secure one Finch had given her, buzzed in her pocket. She frowned, pulling it out. A single, anonymous, encrypted message. "SR-91 was only the first gate. The man you call Chancellor was only the steward. The true master of the glass orchard, the one they call Corsair, is on his way to Seattle. He's coming to collect his property." Maya's blood ran cold. She held the phone up. Cassian read the message over her shoulder, his arm tightening around her, not in fear, but in preparation. The fight wasn't over. It had just found their front door. They stood on the pier, looking not at each other, but out at the dark, sprawling city. They were not afraid. They were ready. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We're a global family here, and I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please, leave a comment below and share your thoughts so we can all connect. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the Mafia Boss Story channel, like this video, and give that hype button a press. It truly helps this story get heard by more people.